Tell me a story, Grandpa. I automatically reached for one of my granddaughter's favorite picture books and began to read. But she was sound asleep after only 2 or 3 pages. I gazed down on her sweet, innocent face, and my heart filled with a tenderness that was almost painful. I found myself silently praying, "Oh God, God, please protect this little mite from harm and from evil men like me." Rising, I turned off the bedroom lights and quietly shut the door behind me. I have led a blessed life, a loving wife, a millionaire's family, a son and a daughter, now 5 grandchildren. I'd had a successful and profitable career. Doors just seemed to open for me, and I retired a CEO. And I had also murdered 3 people in cold blood. It's funny. I hadn't thought about them for years, but now that I'm retired, thoughts of the past keep flooding in, even though it had all been so very, very long ago. Darlene was the first girl, the first woman I had ever loved, my first sexual partner. I was a virgin. She wasn't. And as she was my first real girlfriend, I fell madly in love, or perhaps just in lust with her. Darlene was attractive rather than beautiful, with thick chestnut hair, a full figure, and a frank, engaging smile. I believe her eyes were brown. Yeah, they were brown. She was extremely good in bed, and we couldn't keep our hands off each other. She was like a drug I couldn't do without, and we were inseparable, and probably insufferable. I spent every moment that I could with Darlene, until my aunt died out west, and I ended up going out of province for 2 weeks. The first few nights away, I phoned her. This was long before cell phones, texting, and the internet, and we had long, erotic conversations. But after about a week, she stopped answering. Right away, I knew there was something wrong. I would have come home right away, but it was impossible. I was stuck there, and when I finally returned, I found my worst fears confirmed. I was heading down the street towards her apartment when I saw her walking towards me, hand in hand, with Rob. Rob was cool, and everything I was not. He was very tall, NBA tall and slim, with blonde, handsome, arrogant features. He was always extremely polite, but also made you feel that you were beneath him, and that he knew you were beneath him, and that he knew you knew. I hated his guts. The situation was bad enough. But with Rob? "Don't make a scene," Rob murmured. I made a scene. It ended with Darlene telling me in a contemptuous tone, "You don't own me, you know. Goodbye." It was one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. I still feel it, after all these years. And yeah, I cried. but thankfully not in front of them. And after I had dried my tears, I wanted revenge. But how? My prayers were answered, perhaps by Satan, but answered in a very strange manner. I was passing through one of the seedier parts of town when I saw Travis working a street corner. Working, which in his case meant the retail of illicit substances. I had a sudden inspiration. A satanic inspiration, perhaps. Travis laughed when he saw me. "Hey, man, you're the last person I thought I'd see down here." "Long time no see, Trav. Can I buy you a coffee? I want to ask you something." "Make it a brewski and you got a deal." Travis took me to a nearby dive bar, and after a quiet conversation in a back corner, I got the gun. It was a .44 caliber. "Big enough to stop anything," Trav told me. And when he asked me what I wanted it for, I said, target shooting?" Travis just smiled. I didn't know much about guns, but I was sure it was powerful enough for what I planned to do. For what, at the time, I thought I had to do. That I must do. They were in the back of Rob's Buick and only had time to look up when I pulled the back door open. I fired 4 times. I shot Darlene 3 times. And she just said, "No," before she died. I closed the car door afterwards. And believe it or not, I was crying. Crying so hard I could hardly see. But I had one more thing to do that evening. I found Travis working the sidewalk in front of a construction zone and told him I had to speak to him urgently. So we went inside a half-finished building. This was an era before they had security on building sites. Trav was walking ahead of me, so he didn't see me take the .44 from under my jacket, press the barrel against his right temple, and pull the trigger. Gosh, Travis had way more brains than I thought. I placed the gun in his right hand. I was wearing gloves, of course, so I didn't leave any fingerprints. And then I went home, where I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I had managed to sneak in without anyone noticing, and was in bed passed out when my horrified mother came in to wake me up. Travis was blamed, of course. No one suspected me at all. The police believed Trav had murdered Rob as a result of a drug deal gone wrong. Darlene was merely collateral damage, while I was cast in the role of grieving ex-boyfriend. For I was grieving for all I had lost. My first love. For believe it or not, I still loved Darlene. And grieving for my lost innocence. I found myself suddenly bursting into tears. In the end, fearing for my mental health, my parents sent me to live with my uncle's family out west, thinking to remove me from the neighborhood of my sorrows. I never came back. A few years later, I met my wife while attending college. We married, had beautiful children, and now beautiful grandchildren. And I enjoyed a brilliant career. I've been so fortunate, and And so Darlene just sort of faded away. But now that I'm entering my twilight years, I find myself thinking about her again, about Rob, and about Travis. They never had the opportunity to enjoy the things I've enjoyed. And I regret that. I guess I shouldn't have murdered them. In the end, the situation wasn't all that important. Not important enough to commit murder. But that's one of the consolations of aging. The beginning of wisdom. The moral of the story? It's never important enough to hurt someone. Violence is never the answer. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,500 subs in 2022. Till midnight. Cheers. Pictures used in today's video, courtesy of Pix Here, that's PX Here, while the music was The Haunting Aftermath by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod.